Welcome to Legacy Den, the place where cycles get confronted, patterns get broken, and purpose gets unlocked. I don't know about you, but listen, today is going to be special because I'm feeling something here because I have Joshua Gaston that is on the line. And listen, guys, he has just written a book that I believe is going to be something that revolutionizes your life and revolutionizes your kids' life or your parents' lives or your friends' lives. Listen, guys, this is why we have this podcast because we're building a legacy. We're building people who are cycle breakers. I don't know if I have any cycle breakers watching right now, but type in the chat if you are like, man, I am a cycle breaker. God has called me to break some cycles, and God is using you to break some things that maybe generations ago your family members struggled with. But in this season, God is giving you the strength and the power to break those cycles. Well, you are watching the right interview and video today. I want to let you know that this den here is where we are building a safe space for survivors and even for those who are like, man, I have some patterns dealing with and I want to shift them. This is a safe space for you, so you don't have to feel uncomfortable. Like, man, am I safe here to be vulnerable? This is a place where you can be vulnerable. You might be damaged, but you don't have to stay defeated. I wrote a book called Damaged but Delivered, and I want you to pick it up, get it. It's my latest book, and listen, man, it is helping you to break unhealthy generational cycles and personal patterns. And I saw Joshua Gaston, and he reached out to me and said, man, I wrote a book. And immediately I said, man, you know what? I need to bring him on my podcast, Legacy Den podcast, to share with you so that you can know how to turn your pain into purpose. That's what he wrote about, how to turn your pain into purpose. Listen up, guys. He has been through some pain, he has been through some damage, but today he stands delivered. And delivered doesn't mean that he is not struggling. Delivered doesn't mean that he has now arrived at a perfect place. Delivered means he has found the new light. He has found hope again. He's determined to make progress. He's determined to put in the work through the power of Christ to get to the other side of better. Okay? And so, listen, man. Today is going to be phenomenal. Today is going to be powerful. And I want you to share this video. I want you to like it, subscribe to this channel, and leave a positive comment because God is about to show up in your life. Listen, let me bring on the man himself, Joshua Gaston. How are you doing, my brother?
Hey, I'm feeling good. I'm feeling good. How are you?
I'm doing well, man. Listen, man, I'm glad to meet you. I know that we went to Oakwood together. We're in ministry together. I didn't get to know you on an intimate basis, on a level where we hang out together, or went to lunch together, or did some games and stuff like that. But I know that when I was leaving Oakwood University, that's when we were you came into the ministry and so forth. My wife knows you. I know you a little bit. And so, man, tell us a little bit about yourself. Who is Joshua?
Yes. I'm Joshua. Joshua
Yeah.
Gaston or Gaston. Some of you have known me as a minister. Some of you have known me as a preacher. Some of you have known me as a father. Some of you have known me as a counselor. Um, I graduated from Oakwood University in 2024 in May, and I studied church leadership. I finished my program through LEAP. And really, I felt a burden on my heart to pursue ministry. In 2018, I received a call. I was walking at a camp in New York, and I met this woman named Dawn. And she said, hello. And I greeted her back. And she said, I don't believe we've met. And I said, no, you look familiar. I said, but I don't think I know you. And she asked me, she said, where are you going to school? And this was at a time of my life where I was at a crossroad and I was looking for guidance and direction. And I said, I don't know yet. I'm just letting the Lord lead me. I just graduated high school. And she says, you're going to Oakwood. You're an evangelist and you're going to study theology. And I looked at that as that was a call from from God because I had been fasting, I had been praying, and that was a clear indication to me that I was being guided by divine orchestration. And before, I think 2 weeks before school started, I received a call from Oakwood letting me know that I had been accepted which I thought was really impossible that I got accepted right before school started, considering I didn't even put in an application till 2 weeks before school started. But when there's a door open for you, it remains open when it's opened by God. And I went in faith and journeyed, and one thing led to another, and here we are today, 5, 6 years later, after I've been through so much pain, and
Hmm.
God has carried me through, and that's what this book is about. But I have a powerful story to share with you today, and I believe this book is going to be able to impact and bring healing that a lot of people have been searching for.
Man, that's awesome, man. So, you've been to Oakwood University. Someone kind of prophesied over your life or brought confirmation or affirmation to your ministry and your calling, and you went to Oakwood University and your life changed. Now, how was it going to Oakwood University for you? Did you feel like it was what you prayed for, what you hoped for, what you felt like it was going to be at Oakwood, or was it like a challenge for you to get through school? Did it add to your pain at all while you were there at Oakwood, or is it like a breeze? This is what I dreamed about. This is what I wanted. This is what I felt like it was going to be, and here I am. What do you think?
Well, I will say this: I wasn't prepared for college,
Okay.
and the reason was because in high school I got involved with the wrong crowd, and I started, um, doing different things that were taken away from my education, and got involved with drugs and just bad company, and my grades tanked. And there was a point in my high school experience where I didn't think I was
Wow.
going to graduate. I
Mm-hmm.
saw a lot of my friends drop out, and I thought that I was on that track. And growing up in a public school system, I never went to any kind of Christian school. So Oakwood was a culture shock, also because I grew up in a predominantly white uh, high school and education system. So when I went to Oakwood, I didn't know anything about Oakwood being an HBCU. People laughed at me for that, but I didn't know. I just knew that that was where I was called to go. And when
Yeah.
I arrived, I just see a school filled with, you know, um, people from different countries, uh, primarily people of color,
Mm-hmm.
and I was shocked.
Yeah.
And but my first semester, I ended up getting on the dean's list. So I went from on track to be a high school dropout. Grades were not the best, C's, primarily C's and D's, to getting on the dean's list, having majority A's. And that just showed me that it was divine power,
Yeah.
because I wasn't
Yeah.
somebody who liked school. I hated school growing up. And to be told by my guidance counselor my grades were not high enough for me to go to college, university.
Mm.
She said my better option was to stick to being local and going to a community college, and I was discouraged by that. And so that's why when I graduated, college looked like a distant dream, not something that I could actually attain, especially at the university level. So that was a miracle to me. Um, while I was at college, yeah, I was able to meet different people, make great friendships. I was also in college when COVID happened, so that was historical. Where everybody was on campus, and then the next moment we're all driving home, all throughout the country. So that was a challenge, but my community, at school, surrounding myself with people who were driven and focused, really helped me to stay consistent. And then having opportunities off campus where I was able to still go out, preach, serve, minister with an organization called NAPS, stands for the National Association for the Prevention of Starvation. And I was able to travel all around the country, preaching, serving, and at the same time still be getting my college education. So it was a blessing. My college experience was um, was definitely life changing for me.
Yeah, yeah. I was in Naps too, man. We went all over the place, did ministry, connected with
Oh
so many
wow.
different people. Learned a lot about cultures, learned a lot about different countries they are bringing, how they do things, and versus how we in North America do things. So many different things you learn when you are in Naps as well. So many different people from Haiti, people from Jamaica, people from Bahamas, people from so many different places. I met my wife in Naps. Listen, man, Naps is something that a lot of people know. If you go to Oakwood during that time period when they were on campus or around campus thereabout, then you are going to know Naps. They did some powerful ministry. God used them in a mighty way, and so forth. And a lot of people have their own story, have their own testimony, and so forth. Whether it impacted them positively or negatively. But there's so many things you could learn from that ministry. Listen, man, Josh, we want to jump into it because your book, man, your book is powerful. I read some parts of it, and I listen, man. I must say that you have been through a lot. You have been through some things that I believe that some people are online right now, and they're going through. And I think that they need to hear this: what you have been through, what you are going through right now, and some things that they can learn to overcome. So, just to start off, your book, Turning Pain. Could you put that on the screen? Show me your book.
Oh
Show the
certainly.
people your book. Yeah, turning what your pain into what purpose. Yeah. Anybody feels like they're in pain right now? Put that in the chat. If you feel like, man, I'm going through some pain, or you have been through something that was painful, put that in the chat. If you have been through anything that has been causing you some pain. Now, Josh, I want to come to you because when did you first realize that you experienced at childhood wasn't normal? What you experienced at childhood was just not normal. Me reading through that book, just realized that, man, that is not a normal situation for a lot of people. Now, a lot of people do go through it, but for the common people, that's not what you hear about their childhood. People's childhood, that they are playing, they are happy, they are jumping up and down. For some people, when they're talking, they paint their childhood picture as it's the dream picture for a child. And some people do go through that. But you, on the other hand, you went through something that a lot of people can relate to. Maybe not the majority, or maybe the majority, but you went through some stuff that I think that, man, we need to hear about. So when did you realize that what you were going through as a child, it was just not normal, and you needed to confront it, and there was healing that needed to take place? When did you realize that?
Well, I would say I realized it when my dad had passed away,
Oh man,
and
sorry about that
it,
too,
it,
man. I read that. Yeah.
thank you. Yeah, he passed away when I was 15. He had cancer when I was 12. He was diagnosed with cancer, and he fought for 3 years. And I talk about that in the book as well. And during that experience of him being sick, it was like I became sick, but spiritually. And everything that had accumulated in my childhood up until that point, because I was still a child, but I was transitioning to being a teenager when he was diagnosed, it uh, it it just started to unfold, and everything was coming out when he
Wow.
was sick.
Wow.
And a lot of people will tell you, when their loved one is sick, it's almost like you're suffering with them, and that's exactly what it was like for me. And as his condition became worse, my condition became worse as well. And
Wow.
I I realized when he passed, in the months after that, I had a lot of problems, and as the couple years went by, those problems became worse. And I realized that I never gave myself time to grieve and to actually process the pain that I went through with him being sick, and then also what I experienced in my childhood. And growing up as a child, I witnessed my dad physically abuse my mom, and there were times when he would just break things and he would have these spurts of rage. And as a child, I didn't know how to process that. I just held a lot of things in, often would freeze up when he would have these episodes. And I didn't have anyone to talk to because a lot of people know in a lot of different communities, especially of color,
Mm.
we are trained. to keep things quiet, keep things in the background, be silent, don't share anything when you go to school because that could threaten the the family. And there was the time when I had a turning point, of course, and I realized that all those things had been accumulating. I got in trouble with the law in my school, and I had to go to court. And I remember seeing all these men walk in with orange jumpsuits on, in chains. And I reflected in that moment and I said, this is where I'm going. If I don't have a change in my life, then I'm going to be in chains. And I need a change in my life because I don't want to be in jail. I don't want my freedom to be taken from me. And I realized that I needed to get away from my environment. And this is me at 16 years old, thinking I need to get away from my environment. I don't know where that thought came from, but I believe that it was
At 16.
definitely
Wow.
guided, yeah, by God. And so I said to my mom because I want to make her happy. So I said, Mom, I said I think it'll be good for me to get away this summer. And that's when I ended up going to my uncle's house in Georgia, and he
Hmm.
sent me to a conference, which I talked about in my book as well. And at that conference, I heard stories of people who had been gone through worse than me, as far as sexual abuse and domestic violence and drug and substance abuse and gang violence, and how they were able to make it through that season. And I said, I said the fact that there are people who have gone through worse than me, who have carried heavier weights than I have, and they were able to make it through, and God was able to carry them through. I mean, one lady, she told a story of how her car was shot up and there were bullet holes all through the door, all through the window. The glass was shattered and not one bullet touched her. And she told another story about how her ex-boyfriend had met her at the hospital to kill her. He pointed the gun at her head. He pulled the trigger. The gun went off. She saw a flash of light. He dropped the gun running away. Somehow the bullet did not touch her, but the gun went off and he ran. Her life was spared. And those stories moved me because for all my life, I would see different people who would go through troubles, go through trials, but often they were dismissed. When people would talk about having depression and they would come to the church, people would dismiss them. I saw a lot of lack of love. I remember, I don't want to talk about that right now, but I went through a lot of different things myself in the church and watching people go through things. And it was hard for me to connect, what people told me about God and with actually what I was going through because there were not a lot of examples in my life at that time. And so hearing somebody's personal testimony was actually the evidence that I needed to believe in the God who could not only save but heal
Yeah.
and heal me.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. That's good, man. Again, sorry about your dad. Sorry that you had to go through what you went through, to experience that as a child, as a teenager, and then have to try to make ends meet and try to cope and try to heal and try to survive and so forth. That's challenging for anybody to go through. That's always challenging. I hope that by God's grace, that you are coping well and you're going through the healing stages. And I'm praying for you, and praying for your family as well. Um, um, you talked about that in your book as well, with your dad being going through what he went through, you going through the pain, and now you realize that wow, there's some pain that I'm going through that I need healing from. In the chapter on growing up in survival mode, how does survival help you stay alive but also keep you stuck at the same time?
That's a great question. There are different trauma responses that people have when they go through traumatic experiences in their childhood and even later in life as well. And really, survival mode is a state of, just constantly being in a trauma response state. And, for different people, it looks different, but it's the brain's response to trauma. And for me, it looked like me freezing up, me developing this sense of abandonment and feeling like I had to draw from my relationships with my friends. And I felt growing up like, my mom was detached. She
Mm,
was mentally checked out a lot of times. And there were times, I'd call her and she wouldn't answer. And, that I didn't understand that what she was going through was actually the response to the trauma that she had experienced with my father. And so now, understanding that I can give her grace. But for me, survival mode, looked like always walking on eggshells, having constant sense of fear. Every time my dad came around, it wasn't a love that I felt, it was a fear.
mm.
And I didn't really have a relationship with him growing up. A lot of times in our household, we fought a lot. And I, looking back, I realized it was because of what we experienced, what we witnessed, had an influence on our behaviors as children. I mean, just fighting, fighting from the time I was 3 years old, fighting. I remember in our neighborhood, we'd go out and we'd have staged fights as 3, 4, 5 year olds. It was age,
You said stage
specific.
fights?
Literally, we would
Wow.
get together and we would all just fight. So the 3 year olds are fighting with the 3 year olds, 6 year olds fighting with the 6 year olds. And I think eldest probably I was around, maybe it was 9 years old, but we all
Where did
would
they
get
grow up?
together and we would just fight.
Where did they grow up again? Is it New York?
I grew up in New York.
In New York. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Where
Yeah.
where in New York? Where in New York exactly?
So I grew up in the Hudson Valley. So it wasn't as tough as
Okay.
where I
Yeah.
was wasn't as tough as like New York City.
Right.
But
Yeah.
New York is tough. Wherever you go, New York is tough.
Yeah. Yeah. That's interesting, man. Yeah, trying to survive and staying alive, and then listen, you realize that hey, I'm trying to survive, but I'm still stuck. That's something. But what's the cost of surviving without healing?
Well, the cost of surviving without healing is that, now being in a constant state of survival, it becomes a hyper vigilant kind of state. People sometimes get into this hyper vigilant state where now they feel like they can't trust people. Everybody is on
Hmm.
alert, high alert, especially newcomers when you meet somebody for the first time. And now you feel like you can't trust them. Sometimes when there's a little bit of a conflict, it feels like a war. When somebody says no, it feels like rejection and abandonment. And also just being, in a place where now expecting the worst, expecting that
Wow.
things won't work out.
I see that.
Sometimes people get into relationships and they just have this feeling like everything is just not going to work out. So I might as well not be fully committed to this person because growing up, they saw their mom and their dad separate. And now, because they saw their mom and their dad separate and they saw their dad constantly being in relationship after relationship, their mom, and their mom and their step parent not being together, and just all this division. It comes out later on where now it's affecting the way that they're able to have a healthy attachment style in a relationship. And so some people just manifest as them being an anxious attachment style where they feel the need to worry, not the need, but they feel worried or anxious about their partner's behaviors that may not even be a problem. Sometimes it comes out as this disorganized, wanting to feel close, but then being pushed away at the same time and pulling away at the same
Yeah,
time.
I see that.
And so I talk about that in my book a little more. Some of these topics are more like therapy centered
Yeah,
topics. So I always, gave my disclaimers in the book that I'm not a therapist, of course, but my experiences that I went through allowed me to, find and seek that healing, and then also be able to present it to other people in a way that's still respectful of you know those who are in their respected positions and professions.
Yeah. A lot of people are in survival mode and not the healing mode. And it's simply because we have been taught to really suppress things. So over these years, we have learned to suppress. And because we're suppressing things, we think that we are safe, it's okay, we are good, we are going to be fine, it's going to get better one day. But after you have been hurt, it's very important that we really try to put in the work to really heal, because surviving is not healing. That's a whole different thing. You being in survival mode doesn't mean that you are being healed. And so surviving looks like just what you talked about, Josh. It looks like you trying to be like, you know what, I'm gonna make it one day at a time. I'm going to take my time and really cope with what I'm going through, and just really do this and do that, and I can't be the person that God has called me to be, or I will never be able to be the woman or the man that God has told me that I am. And so you look down on yourself. You start to define yourself and label yourself by the mistakes that you have done, the experiences you have gone through, and that's survival mode. But there's a healing mode. The healing mode is where you are like, man, in spite of what I have been through, I am not that. I'm not going to let I'm not going to let what I have been through define who I am. That's a whole nother level. And it's very, very important not to let your past define you, not to let your pain define you, not to let what you have been through define you. It's very, very important. Josh, I think that a lot of people, like you can talk to me, but a lot of people maybe you have come in contact with, and maybe you have experienced this, where you were letting your pain define who you are, and you only get healed when you only get to define who you are when you're healed. Talk to me on that.
So I think one of the biggest reasons why myself and others begin to allow their pain to define them is
Mm-hmm.
actually because of the behaviors that they turn to in order to cope with their pain. Imagine feeling like
Okay.
your whole nervous system is on fire constantly, and then somebody presents to you what appears to be an escape, right, or a coping mechanism,
Yeah.
and then you try that coping mechanism, and now it feels as if that burning feeling in your nervous system, right, which I often say is that trauma that people carry, right? There's a powerful book called Your Body Keeps Score, and it talks about
Mm-hmm.
how trauma, is written on your nervous system. And so imagine, people take this coping mechanism and then now they feel a sense of relief from that pain. But the problem is that people who've experienced trauma are more likely to engage in what are known as health risk behaviors. And so that's the complexity of trauma, is that trauma often influences people's behaviors because they're looking for a way out. They're looking for a way to be healed
That's
from
real.
this trauma.
Yeah.
And so that's where you get people struggling with substance abuse. That's where you get people struggling with risky sexual behaviors, especially if they've experienced sexual abuse at a young age. And that's where you find, people start experiencing struggles with managing money, having impulsivity, and a number of and host of other issues, such as overeating, lack of physical exercise, being in bad company, and many more behaviors. And so those behaviors begin to shape a person's identity, because if somebody's engaging in something that is actually degrading their body, breaking themselves down, and they're using that as a coping mechanism, of course it's going to have an impact on their character, because at the end of the day, we are what we think, but we also are what we do, and what we do collectively over time shapes our character. And that's why, for me, my pain began to define me, because my pain, I was using it. I was using coping mechanisms that were actually influencing my identity. If that makes sense.
Oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think a lot of people can relate to that. That we go into this escapism type of mindset where whatever is going to help me to feel well, I'm going to go to that. And like you said, some people move to alcohol, some people move to gifts. Oh, like we're in the season right now of the holiday season. A lot of people are going to try to buy gifts to cope with their trauma, to cope with the pain that they have been through. And so they feel like a
Hmm.
way to be healed is if I buy a nice car for this Christmas, or buy a nice house for this holiday season, or buy a nice shoes for this holiday season. And that's how I'm going to cope with the pain. Because in this season, maybe they got their heart broken. And from that heartbreak, from that relationship, it seems like the only way they can really feel a sense of healing is if they just spend their money, buy gifts, treat themselves, go to the hair salon, get their hair done. These expensive wigs, these Brazilian wigs for $400 or $500, and they're buying these things, and they're like, man, I'm gonna upgrade my iPhone, and I'm gonna get the iPhone. What is it now? I don't even know, 17 or whatever it is now. I'm gonna get the latest, and that they have been doing. That's the reason why their bank account is always zero and sometimes negative. Is because they're trying to go to these escapisms because they are trying to be healed. They're trying to be well. But how did you get well? How did you get well? What are some things that you did or God did to you that got you well, that got you healed? Because people are online right now and they're going through, They're going through the survival mode. They're buying gifts. They are turning to boyfriends. They're going in beds with different people to try to feel some type of joy, get some type of wellness, man. Because the trauma that they have gone through is a lot. But how did you get to where you are now to write a book? How did you get to where you are now to feel a level of healing in your life? And are you healed at the same time? Break it down.
Well, it all starts with understanding trauma,
Mm-hmm.
right? Understanding, what exactly it is that I experienced. Because there's some people who go through
All
their
right, break
entire
it down. So
life
let's slow it down.
suppressing.
Let's slow it down. Let's slow it down because now you're going through some stuff. And again, your book has a lot of therapeutic information in it. So we're going to break it down. Now, what is trauma? Let's break it all the way down.
Okay, so trauma, um, I'm going to reference my book
Uh huh.
just because I want to give everybody the, the juice. So,
Right.
trauma,
Mm-hmm.
I read in chapter two, and I don't want to give everybody everything because I do want, you to be anticipating
Yeah. Yeah. We want you
getting
to
your
get the
copy,
book.
reading this book. So I'm not gonna give everything, but I will give you a sneak peek. I believe in reading samples, so I'm gonna give you a sample. So chapter two is called the complexity of trauma, right? Understanding health risk behaviors, and in the first part of the book, I talk about what is trauma. Okay, now I didn't realize right how early pain begins teaching us its own language, and long before we understand the world, we're often about shaped by what the world hands us. And so as I grew older, right, I started to understand, recognize how the patterns of my childhood, like fear, instability, right, walking on eggshells, like I talked about, had quietly woven themselves into my behaviors, my coping mechanisms, and my understanding of love. And so trauma, right, is the first step is we have to understand trauma, what trauma is. So trauma is any experience that overwhelms the nervous system's ability to cope, leaving lasting effects on the brain, the body, emotions, and sense of safety. Trauma is not defined by the event itself, but by what happened inside of you because of the event. So this understanding it aligns with leading trauma research, including the work of Bessel van der Kolk, who's a medical doctor and he specializes in trauma, healing from trauma, and he wrote a very powerful book called Your Body Keeps the Score. So that's what trauma is. It's that imprint that was left within you, written on your cells based on the experience that you encountered. So when people say things like, "Oh, just get over it," it happened so long ago. You got to move on. You got to be a man about it. It's not that simple because now we're getting into actually what's on a genetic level. what's on a cellular level. And so it's like I'm trying to get over it, but every day I wake up, it's still with me. I'm carrying
Mm.
this weight. And everything I've tried to do to get rid of it, that's why people who turn to substance end up abusing those substances when they turn to it for easing their pain. And so for me, the turning point was when I realized my trauma, when I started to take an inventory of, okay, this is my trauma, this is what I experienced. But for me, it took me going through seasons of so much pain for me to really open my eyes and see exactly what was going on within me. And it was in my first marriage. I went through a very traumatic experience with my first wife, and I was going through domestic violence. I didn't want to talk about it
Oh
because I'm a
man,
minister of the gospel. I'm
I'm
preaching,
sorry about
but
that,
at the
man.
same time,
Hmm.
thank you. At the same time, I'm going through domestic violence behind closed doors. And, in my book, I talk about that. I don't have to go all into detail about what exactly I experienced right now. But it was in that experience that I realized later on, as I came to my breaking point in escaping from that abuse, it was when I got to the point where I realized that I was being abused, that I began to reflect on my childhood. And I realized that I had normalized abuse. And often, when somebody goes through a traumatic experience in their childhood, especially domestic violence, there's numerous studies that show they're at risk for either being a perpetrator of abuse or becoming a victim of abuse, unless they understand that that was not normal what they experienced,
Yeah.
which goes into discovering what trauma is. And so I didn't realize until I was in it myself. And I looked at my mother's response. My mother often would freeze up and she wouldn't fight back.
Was that
I
what you
never saw
did?
my mother
Did you
fight back.
freeze up or you didn't fight
I
back
froze up.
or? Hmm.
I froze up. Whenever she would put her hands on me, I'd freeze up. And it was almost like I couldn't move. But
Oh
also at the
man.
same time, I made a commitment based on seeing what my mom experienced that when I got married, I would, under no circumstances, put my wife through what my father put my mother through.
That's good.
And so not only was it normalized, but it was also like a sense of purpose that I was finding in it. Oh, I'm
Yeah.
going through this, but this could be my test, and I'm not gonna do what my dad did. So that's the tricky thing about trauma is that
Mm.
sometimes people will find comfort and solace in the pain
Yeah.
because it reminds them of a familiar place that
Yeah.
they've been at.
And you said it in your book too. You said that in chapter 2, page 36, that trauma didn't wait until adulthood to affect me. It shaped me while I was still too young to understand why I was always bracing for something to go wrong. Mm.
Exactly. So so trauma, people have to understand first, what is it that you've experienced, and that's why very strategically wrote this book because it was birthed from my pain, but it was
Yeah.
also birthed from my experience of overcoming it. And so
Mm.
that's why the first chapter I started off with laying the foundation of adverse childhood experiences, right? And I take the reader on a journey, right? As you read about some of my experiences, you're also reflecting on your own. And now you're taking an inventory, at the end of the chapter as you reflect, okay, what trauma did I experience?
Yeah. So
Okay,
you're
now
saying
what is
pinpoint it. Pinpoint it.
exactly?
Yeah.
Get straight to
Pinpoint.
the root.
Yes, sir.
Because a lot of times we like to treat the symptoms,
Right.
but when it comes to dealing with the root, that's how you activate the healing. You
Yeah.
have to go down deep within. And the problem is with some people, sometimes their memory is gone. They don't even remember what it was that they experienced. And so for me, I had to go deep, deep, deep into the depth of my mind and I had to reflect. And that's what this book helped me to do.
Yeah, and Josh, this is the reason your book is helpful. Your book is helpful for people because what you're doing right now, you are opening a lot of things for people that have been through a lot of pain, a lot of damage, a lot of wounds and scars, and you're guiding them through the pain. because to get them from pain to purpose, it's very, our book is very similar, by the way. To get them from pain to purpose, you're showing that you have to pinpoint it, right? You have to identify that thing. It's crazy. We never talked about our books. We never talked about it, but as you're talking is a very similar things that I wrote about as well. Very, very similar. I was damaged as well, and God brought me to delivered in the name of Jesus. And I talk about the three things you have to do: pinpoint your patterns, pause them, and pivot to your purpose. We never talked. We never shared about what we what we went through, what we're gonna write about, and I didn't even know all of that because I didn't read all of your book as well. I just sensed like God was saying, "Bring this man on Legacy Dance podcast," because the title of the book was just like, "Man, bro, this is what my podcast is about. I need to bring you on so you can share some hope to people." But it shows that what happens is when a person goes through pain, when a person goes through damage, one of the things that is going to be very helpful that I recommend is getting, like for you, for your level of pain as well, I recommend a trauma therapist that's different from a counselor, that's different from somebody who's just going to give you coping tips and just give you some three-step process or just listen to your pain. A counselor or a therapist will just listen to you and then make one or two suggestions. But a trauma therapist specializes in dealing with patients who have experienced some level of trauma. And so I would recommend, as you're reading this book, Turning Your Pain into Purpose, that you also find a trauma therapist. Right. Thank you, Josh, for putting that on the screen. But you also find a trauma therapist. You are going to need somebody to walk you through this. While you're reading the book, that's something that you're doing personally. You need that book. You absolutely need that book because some of you are going through that and you have done nothing for the last 15 years, the last 20 years. You have not done anything to really deal with those wounds, right? And so this is going to help you to deal with those wounds. Guys, all I'm saying is, for me as well, Josh, for me, writing this book and so forth, the thing is, a lot of people focus on self-care, but not a lot of people focus on soul care. And self-care is where, man, people are trying to get their nails done. They're trying to get their hair done. They're trying to get their feet looking good. Those are good. Trying to dress now. I'm a person, I classify myself as a person who dresses nice. I love dressing. I like taking care of myself, my body, right? Going to Planet Fitness, so forth, and all that. Very, very good. But the other thing is the soul, the internal, right? Not just the external, but the internal is very, very important to be taken care of as well. Dealing with the heart, dealing with those wounds, dealing with those scars that you experience as a child, as a teenager, growing up, and even as an adult. And it's very important to be intentional about that. And so I'm recommending, I'm suggesting, I'm commanding, I'm declaring, I'm testifying, I'm telling, whatever word resonates to you, you need a trauma therapist. You are going to need somebody to guide you through those things, right? You are going to need somebody to sit down with you. It might take several years. I'm not talking about one appointment that you go in. I've been going through this thing for years now. You might need somebody to just go in and sit down for a lifetime. I know I need it for a lifetime. Somebody to go in to be like, listen, these are things that are causing you to be triggered. Whenever you're in this relationship, that's the reason why you fall into in this bed with this person all the time. Or no matter you change a person, you might start dating another person because you're thinking, oh no, that person did not love God enough. That's the reason why they influenced me to get in the bed with them. Or that person did not love God enough. That's the reason why they keep texting me like this. Or I keep finding myself in the same position all the time. Or every time I date these are the same type of people I date. I don't know why I find myself dating the same people all the time, breaking my heart the same way every single time. Sometimes it's not the person and it's not you. It's the wound in you. Oh God. It's the wound in you that is causing you to experience those things, to make decisions like that, to put yourself in positions like that. And until you deal with, watch this, the wound, oh God, you are going to find yourself in a cycle. Good God.
I gotta chime in. I gotta
Yes,
chime in because you
yes.
just said it. You know, in chapter 9, that's when I go into the blueprint.
Yes.
right? Because this is what I realized from my experience. It wasn't enough to just say, "Oh, I've been through a painful experience,"
Right.
right? And say, and reflect on my pain. That's the tip of the iceberg.
Right.
But the first step I gave in my book was identify and understand the root wounds
Yes,
of your
sir.
trauma. And so there's an old saying that is often repeated that your purpose is often hidden in your pain, but your pain, I add to that, but your pain is often hidden within. And so the first step in order to begin turning your pain into purpose is that you have to identify, acknowledge, and name the root wounds that have been influencing your emotions, decisions, and behaviors. And then the second step is you have to reframe and rewrite your internal story. And so that means instead of looking at myself as a victim, because yes, I was a victim of domestic violence, I was a victim of parental alienation, I was a victim of injustice in the justice system when I was fighting for my daughter, and it took me over a year just to get her back into my custody. I was a victim. But you know what? In my mind, I had to make the decision that I was not going to stay a victim and that I could change my mindset from one that was I'm a victim to you know what? I'm actually an overcomer. And in spite of everything that I've gone through, I'm still standing. And so that reframing and rewriting your internal story, it doesn't mean the pain is going to go away, but what it means is that you're not going to give up. What it means is that you're not going to have a victim mindset, but you're going to make the decision to take these broken pieces and begin rebuilding your life one broken piece at a time. And so I came to the place in this step where I had to redefine what does success look like for me? Is it driving the most expensive car? Is it having the most money? What does success look like for me? And so I redefined it and I started to say, you know what? Success is I'm healing from my trauma.
Yeah.
Success is I'm breaking the generational cycle so that my children don't have to go through the same exact cycles that I experienced,
That's good, Josh.
you
That's
know.
good.
And then the
Yeah.
third step
Mm-hmm.
is can I go into the third step?
Oh
It's only
yeah,
four.
please. Oh, give it
Okay.
four. Give it four. Give it
So
four.
because I want to make sure I touch on this. So the third step that I go into. Oh, so another thing before I go into the third step with reframing your internal story, rewriting and
Right.
reframing it. When you look at the story of Joseph, right, in the
Mm-hmm.
Bible, Joseph was betrayed by his brothers. He was sold into slavery after being thrown into a pit, and he's in a land that he's not familiar with a language and people that don't know him and that he's not comfortable with, and his whole life completely changed. He had a dream that he would one day be elevated, and now he's actually been put down to the lowest point of his life. And I can imagine that he struggled with that pain. But at the end of his story, when he came in contact with his brothers, he told them, he said that you meant this. He said, for evil. He said, but God, he said, meant it for good. And this did not suggest that God caused the trauma, but that God assigned a new meaning to the trauma and was able to work it out for Joseph's good, where Joseph could look back and say that, look, you meant it to destroy me. You meant it to
Yeah.
pull me down into a low place. But God had his plan that he was working out even in the midst of my pain. Because you know the story of Joseph. Not only was he sold into slavery, but he was wrongfully accused and wrongfully imprisoned. And now
Right.
he's in prison for something that he didn't even do. But God took him from the lowest point of his life, from a place that was completely broken, and carried him into a place of blessing. And I think there's somebody here, who's in a broken place, who doesn't understand how in the world can all these broken pieces, all these mistakes that I of my existence, how can
Yes,
all this
sir.
somehow be taken together and put together to make something of meaningful purpose. But I want you to realize that God specializes in taking broken things and making beautiful masterpieces from them. And there's so many examples in the Bible, and that's why I couldn't have written this book, turning your pain into purpose, without including, that element of faith. Not overdoing it, and I say overdoing it because I know there's some people that might feel that way about certain things. I say overdoing it because I had to bring it in a certain way where, people who may have been feeling like God was their enemy or not believing in God could be reintroduced to God, the God of the Bible, because he does not gaslight. He does not dismiss your experience. He does not dismiss your pain. He's not telling you to go and pray about it. No, you know what he's doing? He's coming with you and he's meeting you in the midst of that pain and that wound. And he's bringing healing and he's assigning new meaning to it so that what the enemy meant for your evil, God is taking it and he's turning it into good. And so I want you to look at God from a different light, not just looking at Joseph's story and the story of Job, but looking at Tamar. And I went into that Tamar and her experience with sexual abuse from her own family member. And it's interesting that all of these years, right, that story has been preserved. That story has not been taken out of the Bible. That story has been preserved because it is a biblical validation for survivors today
That's
of
good.
abuse. And God wants us to know, who've experienced trauma, that He's not overlooking our pain. It's not a side note. No, it's relevant and it's important. And He loves us enough where He put that story in there, where her voice was not heard. It was ignored. She appealed to ethics, to law, to justice, only to be trampled upon by somebody who was supposed to protect her. And that story is there because God wants every survivor to know that He sees our pain and that He wants to do something greater through it and after it. And so the third step is building a safety net of support. So I realized that, I didn't have community. And I think part of the reason was because of COVID. I didn't have community because of COVID, right? COVID
Mercy.
created a lot of people uh, going into a place of depression, of anxiety, and had broke down a lot of different communities that people had set up. And I think it's because we were no longer meeting in person. And so a lot of people started going through even more silent battles. And for me, that's what happened to me once COVID hit. You know, I wasn't meeting up with my friends anymore in college. I lost a lot of contacts. And now I was isolated and I was by myself. And one of the
I
things about pain, right, is that pain thrives in
in
isolation.
isolation. Yes, sir.
And so I realized that I had to get strategic about how I dealt with my pain,
Mercy.
that it was not going to just go away, with me by myself, but I had to bring myself into an environment where now I'm surrounded by a safety net of support. And I love the word safety net because safety net is so that let's say that you do fall. Let's say that you do start engaging in health risk behaviors or you start engaging in unhealthy coping mechanisms. Well, now you done brought yourself into a safety net of support where you have people who will uplift you, people who will speak life into you, people who believe in you and who can remind you of your assignment, of your calling, of your gifts, of your vision, of your dreams, and can speak life into you and build you up in those seasons where you may feel like you're at your lowest point. And so that safety net that I built around me was so that I could have that support in that season, that supportive community, and
That,
so it
no,
might.
that's good. Let's pause down. Pause there. Let's pause right around there because you talked about something that's good. In step four, you talked about community. Now you are. I know you're going fast, but I want us to slow it down there because I think that this is highly important to know that community is of importance for you in your journey of healing from pain to purpose. Okay. For you to move from pain to God's purpose for your life, you are going to need community because God created it so that we would be in community. When you look at even Genesis, you see that the Bible said that God came to Adam and said, "It's not good for the man to be alone." Now, The Hebrew word that is used there signifies companion, that man needed a companion. Somebody liked him. So God fashioned him a woman and we got marriage, right? And so here we find out that God put this institution called marriage together between a man and a woman. But in the ideal sense, in the essence of it, it was to foster community, that man would not be alone. He would have somebody who would be able to help him when he feels emotionally weak. The woman would be there to help him when he feels burdened down, when he feels like life is lifing. A woman would be there to help him. There would be a companion to him. She would be there to support him. She would be there to love on him. And we need somebody in life. Sometimes you might not be married. Maybe you're single. Maybe you are like, man, I ain't even called for marriage, but I'm going to be alone. No, not because you're single means that you have to be alone. No. God does not want you to be alone. And watch this, when you are alone by yourself, you just go to work and come home, you're by yourself, you stay by yourself, you're locked up in the room by yourself, you don't go out, you're just by yourself, you are just alone. What happens is you move from being alone to being lonely. Now, that's a dangerous place to be. Whether you're called to singleness, whether you're single, it's a dangerous place to be not just be alone, but to feel lonely. It is not God's will for you to feel lonely. That's where in isolation the devil tries to take advantage of you. When you feel lonely, that's when he pulls in all of these different websites for you to get addicted to, because you're feeling lonely. That's when he puts people in your life, and even though you are single and you know that God has put parameters around you so that you would wait until marriage, because if he calls you to marriage, then you will go into marriage in purity, or you will go to marriage healed. You'll go into marriage not broken, right? And so what happens now is when you feel lonely, you start to do things that God doesn't want you to do. You start to drink things that God doesn't want you to drink because you feel lonely. You go into this escapism type of mindset again, to escape the loneliness by trying to satisfy your loneliness by these different things. But God lets us know that, man, in his presence there is fullness of joy. And so when you come in God's presence, here's the number one. You stay in God's presence to overcome that loneliness, okay? That loneliness, you stay in his presence, you find joy. You're not lonely anymore. You know that whether you put your bed in heaven or hell, David says that he's there with you. So you are assured that, number two, God is with you. Number one, you stay in his presence. Number two, be reminded that God is ever present with you. And number three, you are going to need community. As the writer of Hebrews says, forsake not the assembling of one another together. That's why we have a church community. That's why it's so important for you to find a healthy church community, because in a healthy church community, you will, the very word community gives it away. You'll find people who are going through pain. You'll find people who have been scarred. You'll find people that have been broken like me. You find people who have gone through damage, who have gone through pain and gone through scars and so many different things that you can relate to. You can find small groups. You can find Bible study groups. You can find so many different elements for you to connect to people with and talk and learn people's names and share your emotions and share about your week and how challenging it was. And somebody can encourage you and somebody can pray with you and you have a friend, and life becomes easier because you have community. And so don't go into that place of being alone to the place where you're feeling lonely. My God. Yeah, so Josh, I really appreciate you sharing that point, because that is important. Now, give us the fifth step.
So the third step was so the first step, I'm just going to go over it again. The first step was is identify and understand the root wounds of your trauma.
Yes.
The second step is reframe and rewrite your
Yes.
internal story. I probably should have put in there revisit too, but
Mercy.
reframe and rewrite your internal story. I'm not a victim, I'm a survivor, and I'm not just a survivor, I'm an overcomer.
That's good.
And then the third Uh, the third step is build a safety net of support, right? Whether it's your local social worker, school
Okay.
counselor, therapist, spiritual leaders, such as your pastor, rabbi, imam, reaching out to provide can provide that network of support and understanding.
That's
And
good.
then also another thing too that I need to add to that before I go into step four
Mm-hmm.
is, for me, right, when I first made my escape from domestic violence, it was actually through calling the National Domestic Violence Hotline, which is 1-800-799-SAFE or 7233. Again, one eight
That's
hundred
good.
799 SAFE or 7233. So I picked up the phone. Never once in my life did I ever think to call this number. But as I was sitting down, I'm separated from my children. I decided, I just had this thought. I need to call this number. I need someone to talk to. So I called the number and I started talking about all my experiences. And to my surprise, a man answered the phone and he took 2 hours to listen to me.
Wow.
And that was a turning point for me because I realized that when we get into community and then we break the silence, right, we actually open up the door to healing. And silence, right, silence can be lethal because when there's something that's going on and you don't talk about it and it gets worse, it can lead to situations that can be life threatening. It can lead to health conditions. And this is all facts. I have my sources cited. This is CDC, you know, this is all science based. When trauma is not treated, it can lead to devastational effects. And so when I decided to break the silence, right, and I sought out solace in community, it actually opened the door to my healing. And I was connected with an organization that then began meeting with me, providing me resources and so many things. And I was blessed by that. Then I started going to conferences, and then I
Yeah.
started being able to speak in different um, conferences, environments. And that leads to my step four, to turn your pain into purpose, which I believe is the blueprint. Because turn is not turn your pain into purpose, it's turning your
Turning.
pain into purpose. And the reason it's turning your pain into purpose is because turning your pain into purpose, like I said before, does not mean that your pain is going to go away. You might have to continue to work at it and work at it and work at it. But what it means is that that pain is not only going to be lessened over time, but that now, you're going to be able to find meaningful purpose out of it. And step four is become a vessel of healing for others. Become a vessel of healing for others. And so that's going out, in those environments, right? Where now you've built that community. Well, in your community, there are other people coming into that community, maybe by your invitation or by the invitation of others. But now you become a vessel of healing for others, where now you're able to equip somebody else who has gone through a traumatic experience and give them the tools that they need and point them in the direction that they need to be pointed in so that they too can find that healing. And that's how you continue that cycle of turning your pain into purpose.
That's good, man. I'm just taking notes here as you're talking. Listen, man, this is powerful. This is helpful. And type in the chat if this is helping you in any way. Maybe you have some questions, type in the chat as well. Joshua will be watching the chat as well and responding. And listen, if you are going through any type of domestic violence, if you are being abused, anything that you're going through, I want you to take the right action. Be okay with that. Yeah, take the right steps. Number one, call the right people that you need to call. Number two, find yourself a trauma therapist or a Christian counselor or somebody. You need community. You're going to need somebody to walk you through this. Don't do life alone. It is not normal, okay? God wants you to move from where you are to where He wants you to be. And so it is this time, it's this season for you to take the right steps to get healing. A lot of us have been through a lot. And that's the reason why I'm so passionate about this, because I've been damaged as a child. I grew up in a damaged environment. I've been broken. I've gone through it. I've seen it all in my teenage years and even in my early years of life. I was broken, but God delivered me from that. And I said that, you know what, the next rest of my life, however long I have on this planet, I'm going to tell people there is a God that can rewrite their story. There is a God. His name is Jesus Christ. He can rewrite your story. No matter how damaged you are, no matter how broken you are, no matter the struggle, there is a God who can rewrite your story.
Yes. Yep. Yep. And when he does that, it's like the brokenness that you had and what people saw you and knew you
Yes.
for that brokenness. When they look at you again, it's like they can't even recognize you.
Yeah, that's
And
good.
I think about Joseph because his brothers didn't recognize him.
Talk about
It's
that.
not that his skin color had changed. I'm sure he had the same hair texture because they weren't doing hair transplants back then. The man looked exactly, he wasn't who he was before. They saw him, the last time they saw him, he was broken. But this time when they saw him, he was rebuilt.
No,
And when
that's good.
God rebuilds somebody, they do not bear any sign of being broken. Imagine it's like a cup, you know, that was broken. Maybe the handle came off. Well, you can try to glue it back on, but what you might end up seeing is, some of the remnants of what that cup experienced of being broken. Well, when I think about it, it's like with God, He's able to take something that was broken and He's able to mold it and shape it in such a way. That's why they call Him the potter. He molds it and shapes it in such a way that you can't even tell that this pot this piece of pot was broken
That's good.
because the master potter put his hands on it and he transformed it in such a way where it became brand new. And that's why I think about the scars I used to carry. I remember praying a prayer. I said, Lord, I don't want to carry my scars. I don't want to carry my wounds. I said, sometimes it feels like all it takes is just a trigger, somebody to say something to me a certain way, or for me to go a certain area. And I remember my dad, and I start feeling this pain. I said, I don't even want to feel that. I don't even want to be
Mm,
triggered anymore. I don't want to carry any wound, whether it's
that's
been
good.
stitched up or not. I said, I don't want to carry any scar.
Yeah.
I said, so I'm asking that you
Mm,
please heal me in such a way so that the scars will be completely gone. And I thought about the lepers that came to Jesus for healing, rather that Jesus came to for healing. And these lepers, if those of you who don't know about leprosy is a condition that just begins to eat the flesh. And people historically were shut out from society and they were in quarantine while they were trying to be healed from this leprosy. Their skin would turn white and then flesh would start deteriorating. So anyway, it left scars, these these huge scars on their body. But when Jesus, when he healed them, it said, well, actually it said he told them to go show themselves to the priest, to move forward in their healing. And when
yeah.
they began to move forward, it said that, they were healed as they went. And I can just imagine, all these flesh, pieces of flesh showing and putrefying smells, boils and stuff all over them just as they're going. They're being healed. And as they get to the priest is not saying, leper. No, he's saying healed and delivered and set free. And now they're able to have an entrance back into society. And so when God heals somebody, the all the remains of that trauma, of that wound, of those scars, in my opinion, I believe that those things, are completely, healed and taken away. Now there are some times where people do carry some things, like Jacob, who carried that limp for the rest of his life, but it was a reminder of his
Yeah.
encounter with God. And so whatever God allows us to still carry is ultimately for his glory and
Man.
to keep us, close with him. And that's where I learned how in my pain now, when I go through things in my pain, because I do still go through stuff, every
Yeah.
day. I'm
Yeah.
human. People hurt me. People say things that's wrong. But now, because of my experience, I learned, pick up the phone, call somebody, go out to an event, or conference that's taking place, get into the atmosphere of healing. But then also, I learned how to take my pain and I learned how to talk to God about it because my image that I had in my mind of God, it changed. That he no longer was somebody who was far away, but I realized he's right here.
That's
He's
good.
ever present, and so just taking that mindset and shifting it really can
Yeah,
be
that
beneficial.
listen, man, that's good. That's good. The book is so good based upon what you're talking about that I believe that listen, we're gonna give them the hook. Any other step, you need to get the book. Okay. If you want the other steps, if you want the other chapters, if you want the other things that are in this book, you are going to need to get this book. Joshua, you have been through a lot. You have lost a father. You have lost a mom. You have lost your mom's presence. You have lost so many different things growing up, right? You said your dad passed away because of the traumatic experiences your mom went through. She went through a season of shutting down as well. You watch your family broken. You have been through a divorce. You have been abused as a child, but now you're walking in purpose. You're on podcasts. You're an author now. You went through college. Now you are a transformed man. You are healing, and you are turning your pain into purpose. And you are on a mission for people to move from where they are to where God wants them to be. Joshua, listen, man, this was powerful today because you are on a journey of bringing people to experience a transformed life. And I want to thank you so much, my friend, for coming on today to share with us. Listen, the book is so good that, guys, you got to get the book. The book is powerful. You got to get it. You got to get it. If you have been in it, if you have been through any traumatic experience in your life, you got to go get the book. Now, Josh, where can people find you? Tell us, where can they find you on social media? How can people find you? And how can people find your book?
So to find me, you can research. You can go on Instagram, and you can type in Joshua Gaston. That's Joshua Gaston, and then the word author, Joshua Gaston author, or Gaston author, Joshua Gaston author. And in my bio is contained the link to this book, Turning Your Pain into Purpose. We're about to be in a new year, and this is a perfect time. If you've been struggling with turning your pain into purpose, then this book is for you. If you've still been carrying the weight of your wounds from your childhood, then this book is for you. If you know somebody who's encountered domestic violence and is still carrying that weight, this book is for them. If you know somebody who's experienced any kind of trauma, any kind of trauma, whether it's trauma in the childhood, sexual abuse, physical abuse, emotional abuse, this book was specifically written with you in mind. And so you can find me on Instagram at Joshua Gaston author, or you can follow me on. You can also connect with me on LinkedIn. You can just type in Joshua Gaston, NICU Dad, and you can connect with me there. And you can find the book on Amazon if you type in all capital, Turning Your Pain into Purpose, and you can get yourself a copy.
That's good. That's good. Thank you so much, my friend. This was a blessing. Thank you for coming on. I got to learn more about you, learn more about your story. You might be damaged, but listen, God has a destiny for you to reach. God has purpose for you. And type in the chat if this conversation blessed you. We're just two grown men having a conversation about their damage, about their pain, and how God can turn things around. I just believe that on Legacy Den, this podcast, God is about to rewrite your story. And so stay tuned, guys, for more conversations like this to help you navigate your season that you're going through. Because wherever you are, whether you're in the middle or you're on the journey here and you maybe feel stuck, like, man, I moved from damage and I'm here, I'm trying to get you delivered, but I'm stuck. Stay on this podcast. By the grace of God, I believe God is going to take you all the way to delivered. Peace. I'll see you next time.
There is a new story that awaits you. It's time to break generational cycles. It's time to break personal patterns that leave you in pain. I can't let my past make me miss out on God's promises for my life. Damaged but delivered is not about never falling. It's about getting back up. No matter how many mistakes have been made, your value in God's eyes has never changed. It is time to transform pain into purpose and damage into destiny. Yes, you were damaged, but you are valuable. Yes, you had a rough chapter 1, but God is rewriting chapter 2. There is a new story that awaits you, and it's time to pivot to that story.